My guest today is Sarah Cotenoff, and I'm not lying when I say that she's a real podcast expert. Her journey has not been so straightforward, and she's had a few interesting twists and turns along the way. One of those twists was watching cartoons for a year as a job. Seriously. When podcasting boomed in 2015, she started working with one of the longest running podcasts, How Stuff Works. After a few years, she used her knowledge to co-found Podsights, an innovative tool which uses analytics to work out if advertising for a podcast is working. I'm Katarzyna Dąbrowska, and it's simple, you know? Today, my guest is Sarah Cotenoff, and she's a little bit of a podcast expert, I would say. Hi, Sarah. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
I'm really good. I did a little bit of research on you, like I do with a lot of my guests, and you have a really strong background in podcasts, which makes you a little bit different to a lot of the people I've interviewed in the past. Tell me, what is it that you actually do?
That's a good question when I actually think about it because every day is different. But my main role is generating revenue for the company through partnerships. So putting the product in the hands of publishers and advertisers, and also making sure they have a good experience with the product so they come back time and time again.
And if you were to explain this to a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old maybe, how would you explain it?
So what we do is we help advertisers make sure that their podcast ads are working. So we're able to tell an advertiser someone was exposed to the ad and then showed up to their website.
Okay, so it's like a way to measure if the ad is being effective.
Exactly. It's an attribution tool for podcast ads.
And do Podsights also organize these partnerships, or do you just measure their effectiveness?
We just measure the effectiveness. So we don't place any ads. We come in after the buy is done, and we're just a piece of technology that gets layered onto the buy.
Ah, okay, that's how it works. Yeah, I was wondering how it works. So how do these partnerships happen? Someone comes to you. Does the podcast come to you? Do the advertisers come to you? How does it work?
That's a good question. So it actually works both ways. So we have partnerships with the podcast publishers, and they will give us to their clients, the advertisers. On the other hand, we have advertisers who come to us directly and they say, hey, we're planning to do this buy with publisher X, Y, and Z. We want to put you on to measure the buy. So it works both ways.
Okay. My mind's just a little bit blown because I was expecting it to be a little bit different. So that's kind of funny.
Oh, what do you think it was?
I thought that you guys kind of do kind of what InStreamly does. I'm actually not sure if you know what InStreamly does, but basically that you organize these partnerships and help people who have podcasts get, basically make money off their podcast by organizing the partnerships.
No. So basically, this is actually interesting. So you can't have a student grading their own homework, right? That's not really trustworthy. So that's why they use us, because we're a third-party tool that they can use to measure.
Right, and that totally makes sense because obviously, well, everybody just wants to know that they're getting what they're paying for in the crudest way possible. But,
That's exactly it. Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm clear on what it is that you actually do. Okay, so tell me a little bit about how it started for you that you became involved in the world of podcasts.
Yeah, so that's a funny story. I was working in sponsorship at Turner Broadcasting, and I was doing TV, digital, and social. I then moved over to this company called How Stuff Works. They were a website who at the time was dabbling in podcasts. They're one of the oldest podcast companies. So I was doing digital sponsorship for them. And then I started getting into podcasting. And then eventually they were like, hey, podcasting is blowing up. We need someone to sell podcasts. Do you want to switch over? And I said, yes. And I got in just at the perfect time because that's when podcasting really started to blow up.
When was this in the States?
It was 2015.
I have it in my head like the thing, because okay, I've always loved This American Life. That came into my world maybe in 2007. And then I remember when they did Serial, that's kind of for me where the boom began. But of course, I'm not based in the States, so I didn't really, this wasn't based on any kind of empirical evidence, just my experience that all of a sudden everyone's listening to Serial. But you're saying that this boom was about 2015.
Yeah. So when I first got there, what was happening is we would do these digital sponsorships, and then we would, put the advertisers into podcasting as like a bonus. But really 2015, 2016, that's when advertisers started really asking for podcasts. And it was like podcast, podcast, podcast. It was your Blue Aprons, your Casper mattresses, your traditional DR brands. And then what that, transformed into today is like you have these big digital brands getting into the space. So that's kind of the arc of advertising and podcasting.
And what did it look like right at those beginnings? What kind of advertisers were going for it, and what kind were like, no, we're not down with that?
It's funny. So we were tasked with getting the traditional digital advertisers into this space, but it was really hard because there was no metrics. Back then, when you would sell podcasting, what you would sell on is the download number. So it's really hard to tell, like a Delta Airlines, a Macy's, a McDonald's, hey, give me $100,000. And in return, the only thing I'm giving you is the number of downloads.
Which isn't even accurate because not everyone is downloading. Some people are just streaming the podcast.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Different publishers were measuring a download differently. There was no real standard way to measure a download or an impression. So that's, what Podsights aim to fix.
Okay. And so what kind of clients were interested in advertising on podcasts back then?
Back then it was the DR brands. So your Casper mattress, your Blue Apron. It was brands where they could say, go to our website and put in the code for a discount.
These are some probably American brands that I might not be familiar with. What are these brands, Blue Apron and because I'm guessing that most of the people listening also might not have any idea.
So basically, DR brands, it's direct response. So there's a clear call to action and you're telling someone to go to a website and buy something. And by doing that, you can put in a discount code. And that was how they tracked how many people were exposed to the ad and then came to the site.
Okay.
That's a problematic way to measure attribution because coupon codes leak. People might forget to put in the coupon code. So it's not totally accurate.
Okay, so people get the coupon code, they buy the thing, but they actually forget about the coupon code.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so crazy to me. I never forget about the coupon code.
What if the offer on the website is better than the offer on the coupon? You're going to use the offer on the website. That's another issue that comes up frequently.
Okay. So this is the beginning of advertising in podcasts. And how did it continue? How did it progress in the years to come?
Yeah. So then with companies like us, the measurement that you were able to get with podcasting started to look more like the measurement you would get with digital advertising. So these traditionally digital advertisers were more comfortable buying in the space. So then you're starting to see an influx of these traditional advertisers moving into podcasting. So you're getting a mix of the DR brands and the brand awareness guys.
Okay. And how do you measure it now? How are you able to tell that a podcast is successful?
Yeah. So it's beyond just how many impressions and downloads did you get. Now we're able to tell an advertiser how many people showed up to the site, how many people purchased, the revenue driven from the purchase, and we can even measure app downloads and in-app activity. So we're really able to see the listener's activity on the site.
And is it quite detailed? Like you can tell when they're stopping, when they're dropping out?
No. So unfortunately, no one really has that information in podcasting except the players like the Apples and the Spotify. So we don't have listen through data. In podcasting, we work under the assumption that if someone downloaded or pushed play on a podcast, they listen to it. We know that's not actually true, but that's the assumption we work under, just because there's no real way for us to tell.
And how is it working now in podcasts? Because my podcast listening is probably a little limited to the ones that I just mentioned, which is like This American Life, and that's very clear to me on how they do it. But how do podcasts generally advertise? Are they advertising actually during the podcast, or are they advertising before, after, or are they advertising, not during the actual podcast, but maybe on other media that they have about the podcast, like websites or socials?
Yeah. So in podcasting, there's 3 placements. There's your pre-roll, which is before the content starts, the mid-roll, which is in the middle of the show, and the post-roll, which is at the end of the show. We've actually found that there's no real difference between the pre-roll and mid-roll. Both are effective. So you'll see advertisers, a lot of advertisers have their own opinions about, which placement is more effective. So you'll see some only want to buy pre, some only want to buy mid, some want a combination of both. It really varies. Everyone kind of has their own way that they prefer to place the ads, is what I find.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of businesses are happy to advertise now during a podcast? Is it pretty much everybody?
So we're still seeing the majority of advertisers are DR brands, direct response, but we are seeing an influx in these big brand awareness companies. So financial companies, travel companies, things like that. They're getting into the space, which is really exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming, if someone has a travel podcast, then obviously a travel company is going to be more keen to get behind them.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, a lot of these other shows with large reach, those are really appealing to the brand awareness advertisers, because if they're doing a reach play, those big shows can be really effective for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, small shows can be just as effective too if they're super niche. I've seen really targeted small shows be really appealing to certain types of advertisers.
Are you able to say what kind of shows that would be? What kind of show is a super niche one that I would also almost call like a micro influencer that has their dedicated audience that just love them and everything they do?
So there's 2 examples I use. One, this guy told me about his podcast all about Chinese yo-yos. I don't really know what those are.
Yo-yos.
Chinese yo-yos, not just yo-yos. It's a specific type of yo-yo. And this guy has like 1,000 downloads an episode. Wow. That's insane. The other example I like to tell is my 2 co-founders, they have a notebook company. And we use that notebook company to test Podsights in the beginning. We bought an ad on a podcast for people who like colored pencils. And the attribution, the conversion rate was through the roof. So it was a really effective buy, even though the show only had like 200 listeners.
That's actually not surprising to me at all, because everybody likes colored markers, like everybody likes fancy pens, and it's not like a huge expense, and it's something most people can afford. And it reminds me of whenever there's like a financial crisis, there's some companies that do really, really well, or some industries, some businesses. And like one of them is people that sell lipsticks. Because even when there's a financial crisis and you're doing really bad in life, that lipstick is not that much money. It's going to make you feel better. So these little things, and this kind of has that vibe to me, not that they're buying the pencils to make themselves feel better, but it's like an attainable thing that everybody likes.
Well, yeah, and think about it. The people who like colored pencils, they need notebooks. So they're more inclined to buy the product.
Right.
It's just a good fit.
Yeah. Has there been a campaign that you can talk about that like really surprised you? That just surprised you? It can be in a good way, in a bad way, something that you were not expecting.
I can't talk about any specific campaigns.
Damn it!
Sorry.
Okay.
We have all this. We have all this info, and I can't do anything with it. It's like only allowed to be aggregate and whatever. Sorry.
I get you. That's okay. I'll survive. Tell me a little bit about what was your your journey in your working history? Because I don't know, when you were younger, did you think, I was going to work in podcasts?
No.
I definitely did not think I was going to be recording a podcast. So what was your trajectory? Like, you're in high school, you go to uni, and then what happens?
Yeah, so I went to grad school for media studies, and my undergrad was in criminal justice and sociology of health care, and I always thought I would work in like news or making documentaries. That's why I went to grad school. Um, Fast forward, I take a sales class. I love it. And my professor was like, you should go into sales. So that was always in the back of my mind. I was really interested in like media ethics and media law. So I went to Turner to work in the standards and practices department. Really crazy job. You like watch TV all day and make sure that the TV is appropriate. And like you look for
Wow.
nudity and cursing and violence and things like that. It's kind of unbelievable that this was a real job. But
Okay,
that was
hang on.
my
I have
job.
questions. Wait, I
Yeah.
have questions.
Yeah.
So, are you watching TV that is already being shown live, or are you watching TV shows that are being like approved or in the process of being approved, or what's the deal?
Good question. So, my specific job in the department was to watch competitive programming. So, at the time, I was working for Cartoon Network and Adult
Mhm.
Swim. So, I was watching other cartoons and writing reports on how far they would push the limit, essentially. That's all I did for a year.
Wow.
It's a wild job.
Wow.
It's
So, hang
someone's
on.
dream job, you know?
Right, totally. Okay, so you're watching cartoons and wrote reports as to how far they're taken, like jokes or maybe political humor or being offensive or whatever.
Exactly. Yes. All of the above.
When you use the term competitive, I think, what did you say, competitive programming or
Yes.
competitive TV? Yeah. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
So it's like cartoons on other networks.
Ah, okay. So you were working for Cartoon Network and you were watching the competition and seeing what they're doing.
Yep, exactly. All day long.
And okay, what's curious to me is what is the purpose of something like this?
It's a good job to have at someone as a network because you can see what other people are doing so you know how far you can push the limit. And
Hmm.
over time what's acceptable changes,
Yeah.
right? Like what's acceptable today on TV was not acceptable 10, 15, 20 years ago. So you kind of see what everyone else is doing to know what you can be doing and to kind of make sure that one, you're in line with what everyone is doing, and two, you're pushing the limit yourself a little bit.
Wow. Okay. This, I had no idea this was even a thing that networks did. I mean, now it kind of makes sense, but it's quite fascinating.
It's so funny. It's like such an oddly specific job.
Okay. Crazy. I'm going to have to research more into this,
It was a wild
because,
job.
yeah. So you did this right out of grad school or while you were in grad school?
So while I was in grad school, I did internships in standards and practices. So
Hmm.
it
Okay.
made me really attractive when I was out of grad school for a job in standards and practices because there's so few people who do it. Um,
Hmm.
so instead of going right into sales, I knew that I could get a job in standards and practices. And that was my foot in the door. And at any of these big networks, and I would say big media companies as well, like the hardest part is getting your foot in the door. And
Hmm.
when I got the job at Turner, it was a temp program. It was only a year position. So I knew that I had the opportunity to go do this job for a year and then figure out what I really wanted to do.
Okay. And what did you do after? And actually, no, when you actually got the job, was it the same thing? You were still watching cartoons or were you doing something slightly different?
Nope, that was my job. I
That
watched
was the job.
cartoons all day long. Yeah.
What was your favorite cartoon to watch?
Honestly, it's funny that you ask about like what my favorite is because I could tell you what my least favorite were.
Okay, tell me what
And
the least favorite were.
it was these
That was
late
going to be my
night,
second question.
Fox was experimenting with these late night cartoons. And the problem
Hmm.
is, this was my thing. Cartoons were so difficult because think about it, you can draw the people in like so many different positions and doing so many things. So like when I would write these reports, the scenes I would have to write were outrageous. Like I couldn't even believe
Right.
I was writing them. And I would have to put what I was seeing into words. It was a wild job.
Okay. And so what was like what was your least favorite cartoon that you had to watch?
It was these late night shows on Fox. I can't think of the name, but there was like a block of like 2 or 3 cartoons that Fox was putting out at night, and they were so scandalous and my reports were so heavy. They were just so difficult to watch.
But did you have a favorite? Did you have one that you were like, "Oh, I'm excited this is on"?
Honestly,
Yes,
no.
honestly.
No, it's funny for someone who I discovered that I really dislike animation and cartoons. From that job to this day, I watch animation and I like tick a little bit, you know? I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
the memories.
Yeah. Look, I'm with you. I'm not that huge on animated stuff either. Like, I really want to be a person that likes it because I know there's some quality stuff out there, but I just can't. I don't know why. I just can't treat it seriously. And I know there's some amazing stuff out there, but I can't.
So I recently just watched that new Disney movie. Everyone was telling me I needed to watch it. Soul,
Oh, yeah. I think I watched that. That was good.
really good.
Okay. But that's Disney, though. Like,
They're really good at
that's a,
making
they're good at
animated
this
films.
stuff.
They're like the outlier. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like for me, that's not like it's yes, it's a cartoon, it's animated, but like the things that they do, that's the different level.
Yeah, it's you know what I found out when I found this out a long time ago, but like they make the movies for adults. Blew my mind, but it makes sense, right? Because the adults are the ones who have to take the kids to the movie.
Oh yeah, like it has to have like this is why it's cool to watch like Disney movies and all those kind of feature length because when I say cartoons I mean kind of like the little episodes and stuff like that, but like feature length animation, that's cool. I can get behind that because it's generally clever, it's a well put together story, they've got big budgets so they're doing cool things, there's some jokes in there for us to enjoy, like it's solid.
Yeah. Yeah. Still it takes me a little bit to watch them, but I'm more pleasantly surprised.
I getcha. So once you finished watching cartoons, what did you do then?
Um I moved over to work in sponsorship at CNN and HLN.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing like I sat in between advertising and sales and editorial and did all their sponsorships and branded content. Just made sure they were sold through, make sure they were executed properly. Just really like quarterbacking sponsorship executions.
Okay. So basically making sure that it's all being implemented the way that it should be.
Exactly.
And how did the jump into podcasts take place? Because you mentioned it was how stuff works.
Yeah. So I was doing television, digital, and social sponsorships. I then moved to How Stuff Works to do digital sponsorships. And then on the side, they had this podcast division brewing. And I would do some podcast projects as an extension of the digital projects.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we would sell these digital packages and then they would have like a little podcast component. And then podcasting was really growing and we were seeing more and more advertisers in this space. And there was a need for someone to sell podcasting only. So I moved over and that's how I started selling podcasts. It was an accident.
An accident, as most great things in life.
Yeah.
Do you feel that your studies helped you at all in what it is that you're doing every single day? Or
That's a good question. So I have two opinions on this. First, I think that
mm-hmm.
education is never a waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it exposed me to things that I wouldn't have been exposed to, like sales. I would have never known I love sales if I didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to try it in school. I do think that the most important thing is just jumping in and doing it. So, yes, while my education in like media ethics and sales and management helps me every day, I do think I've learned the most by actually being in it and doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that I feel similar to you. Like I feel like lots of my education just opened me up to different things, but nothing kind of beats experience at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly. I think, school was great in that it provided me the opportunity to jump in, and I was able to do internships and, really figure out what I wanted to do. But it was the internships and the actual doing where I learned the most. And I was really fortunate in that my school was really project focused. So it was a lot of doing,
Yeah.
but I know that not all schools are like that. So, it can't hurt, but I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think you have to have it in order to be good at what you do.
Yeah. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about mm, what makes a successful podcast in the context of in America and in Australia or in the UK, like podcasts have really been popular for quite some time, and it's really not a surprise. But in Poland, it's like a really recent boom. Like when I started recording this one, it was kind of before the boom, and I was like so excited. I was like, I'm going to be one of the first people to have a podcast. It's going to be so great. And then by the time we actually released it, literally every one of my friends has a podcast now. You know what I mean? And they all did it before me. So I'm like, fuck. But that's okay. I survived. So here, like the landscape's really just it's in the baby stages. You know, there's one like super popular podcast that's been done by some girl for a couple of years, I think. But besides her, like she was one of the first, and now it's really opening up, and literally every man and his dog have a podcast. So the first question I have for you is, what do you think makes a podcast successful?
So that's a good question. So I don't believe you have to have a lot of listenership to have a successful podcast, like the examples I told before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the barrier to entry is so low that anyone can make a podcast. But if you want to make a good podcast, one, sound quality is a huge thing. So many times I hear podcasts and they're just like so unpleasant to listen to because the sound quality
Mm-hmm.
is terrible. So make sure you have the right equipment, make sure you know how to engineer the audio and get someone to help you if you don't. Two, I think analytics are really important. So if you want to start making money on your podcast, you have to have good analytics. You can't just be saying, oh, well, I get about 100 downloads a month, right? You need to know what metrics matter to advertisers, what the proper rates are. You can't just make up rates outside, off the top of your head. And I think subscribing to the newsletters, really reading what's going on in the industry and really being in it can help you take your show to the next level.
What kind of metrics should you be paying attention to besides the, like you mentioned, 100 listeners is not enough? What kind of metrics should people be looking out for?
So a lot of times I see people say, okay, I have this many downloads a month. It inflates the numbers, right? Your monthly downloads are going to be more than your downloads per show, but that's not what advertisers are buying off of. They're buying off of downloads per episodes or impressions per episode. So you really want to break it down to, X downloads per episode, not going by the monthly. It can be really attractive to put out the biggest number, but that's not the number that matters.
Okay. How do you think that for an advertiser, how do you think it differs from advertising on a podcast to like the regular schmegular channels? Do you think there's any difference? Or is it just
Huge
another medium?
difference. Huge
Ooh,
difference.
tell me more.
So podcasting is an active medium. Someone has to go choose to listen to a podcast, choose to hit play, and listen to that host. TV, you don't know if someone's sitting in front of the TV, walking out of the room, scrolling through the channel. Same with radio. Someone could just be scrolling through the channel and stumbling upon a show. With podcasting, the listener is choosing to listen to this particular show, which means they care.
Okay, it's like a dedicated listener.
Exactly. They care what the host has to say. So if they hear the host talking about a product, they're going to be more inclined to buy the product. So it's a combination of having really loyal fans, having them be really engaged in the medium, and also having it be a really intimate medium. Think about it. The host is like in the listener's ear a lot of the times. So all those things convert to listeners actually purchasing the product.
Okay. So in a way, I mean, I really don't love using the term influencer or micro-influencer, but that is kind of what it is. You have a micro-influencer who has maybe not a huge amount of fans. It could be 100, it could be 500, it could be even, 1,000 or more, but they're super loyal fans that really love what this person does. And in some way they're, for lack of better words, some kind of authority to them. And they're keen to try out the things that this person is doing.
That's exactly it. I can't even say it better than you just said it. That's exactly it.
Woohoo. Do you have your own podcast, or have you had your own podcast?
No. And I have no interest. No
interest. Why not? The same way that you're not interested in cartoons? Is it like it's your job, so you're like not interested?
Yeah, so I always have a theory, and I've had this theory when I worked in TV also, that if you work behind the scenes, you can't want to be in front of the screen, right?
Mm-hmm, I feel yeah.
And I know it's a bad theory to have, because I know a lot of really good producers then turn into on-air people, but I just like the behind the scenes stuff, and I don't think I could tolerate having my own podcast. I couldn't deal with it. Power to everyone who has it. Putting yourself out there like that, not for me.
Yeah, look, I have to say that I had some reservations about having a podcast, because I don't love being in the spotlight, but the format of this one is that I generally talk to somebody else, and it's them that are in the spotlight, not really me, which makes it palatable for me.
No, you are brave.
Thank you.
You are brave. You are thick-skinned.
I hope so.
I just don't have that in me. I would cry every day.
You would cry.
I just couldn't do it.
Okay, well, I haven't cried once yet because of the podcast, so that's good.
That's good. That means you have good ratings and reviews. The things that people say on the internet are horrible.
Let's not go too far. Just no one just dislikes me yet, and I don't have any haters, which is cool. Not yet.
Ugh.
Maybe if the haters arrive, I'm gonna start crying, and then I'll call you and say you were right.
Like, have you ever? Some of the funniest place on the internet, and it's sad, but it's also entertaining. Like, sometimes I go on Reddit and I look up like the podcast I listen to, and I see what people are saying. People are so mean. And then also Apple reviews, people are so mean.
I know, people are the worst.
It's crazy.
Like, I really don't get it, because I just don't understand. If I don't like something, I just don't, listen to it. I don't pay attention to it. I don't have time to write about it on the internet.
Well, did you see that Mark Cuban is inventing this new platform where podcasters can go on and like do their podcast live, and the listeners can like engage with the podcast in real time? And
so it's kind of like live streaming in a way.
Exactly. But the people, they can't show their faces, so they can say horrible things. It's when your face and your name is not on there, it's like all hell can break loose. People get brave. Yeah.
People get real brave. Oh, that's hilarious. I'm going to Google that later.
It's going to be a disaster.
I can't wait.
I mean, it'll probably be great, but, I don't want to hear what people have to say. They're not going to be nice.
We're never going to do it on this podcast. This is never going to happen.
You're brave. You're brave, but you're not that brave.
Not that brave, no. Since we're on this kind of topic, what kind of podcast do you listen to? Like, what is your favorite podcast that you would recommend that everybody has to listen to?
So the one actual real serious podcast that I listen to, there's only one. It's called Last Day. It's Lemonada Media. It's about addiction and mental health. I love that podcast. It's really the only one I listen to regularly. And then I have my guilty pleasure. And it's so embarrassing to say what it is.
Tell me.
But it's Call Her Daddy.
Call Me. I've heard of this one. I haven't listened, but I've heard of it. What is it about?
Terrible. It's about this really pretty girl and her escapades. And I just love it because I love to hear how the other half lives.
Okay. And what is this other half in this?
Honestly, pretty people.
Pretty people. Okay. I get that. You have inspired me to watch this because listen to this because this has been on my list. I have like a long list of podcasts I'm trying to get through. So I might give it a go. And look, since you told me your guilty pleasure, I'm going to tell you what mine is. It's not a podcast, but it's the Kardashians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't follow any of them like on social media because it's not that of a guilty pleasure, but I've watched almost the entire show that's been on for years. And I'm just like, I can't look away.
Do you think it's real though?
No, like, I mean, I think there's parts of it that are real and there's parts that they make up. Like the parts that are bullshit it's clear, because they'll have some made up drama. But, the stuff that's real that, I don't know, they're going on vacation to some ridiculously overpriced hotel or some resort. And, that's like relatively real because they're really doing this. They're having this family dinner. They just have cameras pointed at them. So, I mean, most of it is absolutely bullshit. But
see, I would watch that.
You should.
Sorry, go ahead.
You should. No, you should.
Well, I was going to say, I would watch that if it was like real life Kris Jenner. Like, give her a podcast, let her be real. I would listen to that.
I would too. And I actually have, so my other guilty pleasure besides watching the Kardashians is reading about them, but not reading like on the internet, but like reading books that have been written about them. And the reason for this is I tend to read a lot of serious shit. And so when my brain needs a break, I'll just download some books about the Kardashians. And I used to do this with Bob Dylan. I don't know how the mighty have fallen here, but whatever. So this, I also read about them. I can't believe we just recorded this. I didn't want anyone to know this, but whatever.
This is why I don't have a podcast. See, you're much braver than I am.
Look, I can have it edited out, but I won't. So listen, we're slowly coming up to time. So I want to ask you the two questions that I love asking all of my guests, which tend to be really interesting because they tend to the answers tend to repeat, which gives me some kind of solace. So the first one is, what advice would you give to people who dream of a career in the media industry or specifically podcasts?
I would say to just do it. If you want to be in podcast production, produce your own show. If you want to host, start your own show. If you want to sell, there's enough independent podcasters out there. Reach out, see if they need help getting advertisers. There's enough opportunity to actually jump in and get your feet wet and just be in it. So just do it is what I would tell them.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And the second question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ooh, I think it's two things. The first would be to take care of myself. I thought like hustling and taking care of yourself couldn't go together, but I've learned that those are not mutually exclusive things. And the second would be to trust the process and just know everything will work out in the end. I think, every job and every opportunity is a stepping stone to the next one, and everything always works out.
Oh, I love that one. It's really interesting that you decided to end with that because that's my current private life thing that I'm dealing with right now is trusting the process again, because I had a little bit of a, let's say, a misstep with trusting the process, and I'm coming back onto that road. So I feel like You're like my angel that was sent down to tell me that.
Oh, good.
Just to remind me, beat it into my head. Okay, so with that amazing advice of trusting the process, I want to thank you so much for today. I feel like, I know you're going to say no, but I feel like me and you could have a podcast about pop culture.
We probably could, but you can do it and I'll produce you. How about that?
Ooh, okay. Listen, let's talk. I like this idea. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great week.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.